5 minutes to our friend from Georgia, Mr. Buddy Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. I'll jump right into it. I'm not going to repeat all the stump speech parts of this that I have. $36 trillion in debt, adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days, spending money, $200,000 every second. The speed of light's 186,000 miles per second. Spending money faster than the speed of light. And as we know, the interest on our debt, the second highest line item in our budget now. And we all know it's unsustainable. We all understand that. And we all have heard about the economists who are predicting what's going to happen here. And in fact, Penn Wharton estimate the country's fiscal crisis will become irreversible at some point between 2040 and 2045. So, Mr. Walker, I want to start by asking you your projections of a potential debt crisis with Social Security and Medicare. 70% of our budget. And I'll go ahead and say it. Look, I'm a healthcare professional, a pharmacist by profession, and healthcare is the fastest growing section of our budget because of an aging population. We all understand that, and we've got to get it under control. First of all, we got to have transparency to understand where the problems are. We need that in healthcare, but 70% of our budget, healthcare and Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. And if we don't address that, we can do away with everything else and still not balance our budget.
Well, first, the fastest growing expense of the federal budget is interest. And what do you get for interest? Nothing. The second fastest growing expense in the federal budget is health care. We've written a blank check for health care. Not even Sweden, which provides health care cradle to grave, writes a blank check for health care. It'll bankrupt the country. Thirdly, Social Security is solvable, all right? And the reason it's solvable is because young people don't think they're going to get it. They're wrong. They're going to get it, all right? Seniors think they're going to get taken advantage of. I could use other words, but I won't, all right? So we have an opportunity to reform that program to exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans. And it's not that difficult to do. Healthcare is a bigger challenge. All right, it's a bigger challenge. And by the way, I'm on the Defense Business Board. Defense can't be off the table. There's a huge amount of waste in defense, a huge amount of waste. We need to cut the tail, which is overhead, to sharpen the teeth. And we need to reposition our footprint, force structure, and platforms for the future war, not the past wars. So, look, this is a solvable problem, but realistically, the ground has to be tilled, the table has to be set, for members to take a tough vote. And that's why the commission is absolutely essential.
And you would agree it's got to be bipartisan. I mean, it'd be political suicide for one party to try to do it by themselves. I don't care which party it is.
There were 6 principles that the people agreed to with a 92% support. Pro-growth, socially equitable, culturally acceptable, mathematical integrity, bipartisan support, politically feasible, which means you got to be bipartisan, and meaningful bipartisan support. And the reason being is the margins are close. They're close this year. They were close last Congress. They're going to be close the next Congress.
Sure.
You know, if
You're
you
right.
don't have meaningful bipartisan support, it will not be sustained over time.
You talked about a potential balanced budget amendment, and I agree that needs to happen. Mr. Couchman, if we were to have successful fiscal responsibility amendment, what would be the must-haves?
Oh, that's a great question. The most important thing is a provision that restores the norm of balance. That's most of what you get out of a constitutional provision. You also want to have a supermajority for emergencies so that it doesn't become a loophole. And you want to have a decently long glide path to get to balance. And it's a good idea to be able to choose between primary balance and full balance because it's about double the amount of savings that you would need to reach full balance compared to primary balance. But you also need to have a functional budget process, and that's not something that Congress has right now. And you, sir, have one of the pieces of fixing it, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You mentioned emergencies. Are there any other areas that should be exempt?
No areas should be exempt from the budget, except perhaps net interest, because that is exogenous to what Congress is able to control. Interest rates change based on market dynamics, and the stock of debt that the interest rates are fluctuating against is not something you can do a whole lot about in the near term.
Ms. Bosilla, what, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but you've got experience in Europe, and what would something like a debt break work? How would that work here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so debt breaks enjoy popular support because they tackle the debt, which is something that the entire public can get behind regardless of their political affiliation. But if you look at how they actually work, they either are a deficit limit, in the case of Germany, for example, or in the case of Switzerland, they're actually implemented as a spending limit. In Sweden, it's a combination of those things. I think it's a good approach to target multiple layers there, although you also want things to be very clear. But what's important is also what Kurt shared, is that these debt breaks, they don't try to balance next year, which would cause economic calamity because
How do you
our
eat an
deficit is so
elephant?
big.
One bite at a time.
Right.
Sure.
Over time, they lock in that fiscal commitment credibly with popular support and politicians from all parties standing behind that. And then they give the politicians a process and an oversight function through an independent council to hold lawmakers accountable. So it all works in tandem. But I do need to emphasize that you cannot just adopt a balanced budget amendment and then hope that the budget will take care of itself. Congress still will need to do the tough work of actually identifying how we get on that path to balance. But the balanced budget amendment can act as a commitment device.
Great. Thank all of you for being here.
I
Thank
think
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman from Georgia. Now yield 5 minutes to Ms. Ballant from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.